So my name is Christopher Feeney. I'm the Director of Employers for Change, which is an employer disability information service. I'm a white female with blonde hair and blue eyes, and I'm wearing a sleeveless black dress today. I'm also sitting with a virtual purple background behind me and a white Employers for Change logo. So today we're marking Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And the purpose of this is to get everybody talking, thinking and learning about digital access and inclusion. And also to think about how accessible your organisation or your business is to people with disabilities. There are 450,000 people living in Ireland with a disability, which is 1 in 7 people. So this is a really, really important topic for companies, businesses and employers to be talking and thinking about. Today we're going to speak to Dr. Gerald Craddock and Kyron O'Mahony. Dr. Craddock is the inaugural Chief Officer of the Centre for Excellence in Universal Design. That's a statutory body which was established by the government in 2007, and it's part of the National Disability Authority, which is the lead state agency on disability in Ireland. We also have Kyron O'Mahony, who is the Chief Technical Officer with NCBI, Ireland's National Sight Loss Agency, since 2019. And Kyron previously has worked in the private sector, and he has a great passion for technology and its ability to improve access for people with disabilities and with sight loss. So thank you both very much for joining us today and for sharing your knowledge in this area. To begin, Gerald, can I ask you to tell us a little bit more about the Centre for Excellence in Universal Design and what you do there and your own passion for this area?
Very good. Thanks, Christabel. I'm a white male. I've hit a landmark of 60 years of age not too long ago. Greying hair and a bit of a goatee, wearing a pink shirt and check jacket. So yeah, delighted to be here this morning on World Accessibility Day. Yes, we are unique in that it is the only statutory centre in the world on universal design. We mainly focus on the built environment. We look at technology and we also look at goods and services. And in the areas of, we work very closely with the National Standards Authority, but also with European standards agencies and international agencies on developing or working on revising old standards and how we can upgrade them to cover accessibility and universal design. And I suppose a big area is education, where we work right across the sectors, be it from preschool right up to continuous professional development with the likes of the Irish Computer Society, where we've partnered with the likes ICS, Irish Computer Society, to put in place accessibility courses, mainly for the public sector, but also the private sector have attended a number of the training programs that we've partnered with the Irish Computer Society. Well, that's a quick overview.
Brilliant. And Kyron, could you give us a little bit of information just about NCBI and the work that you do there and your own interest in the area as well?
Yeah, no problem at all. Thanks very much for having us today. As you said, my name is Kyron O'Mahony. I work for the National Council for the Blind. I run the technology section for the National Council for the Blind. I work as their Chief Technology Officer. White male, blonde hair with an NCBI background as well. I'm also wearing a black t-shirt too. So to give you some information about NCBI are the National Sight Loss Agency. There's about 60,000 people in Ireland. We reckon that's a little underreported of people who have sight loss, and we offer support and services for those people of Ireland. I specifically work on the technology team. As you mentioned, my background is more in the private sector side of things. It's my first role in charity. Joined NCBI in 2019, primarily with the view of trying to increase the presence of technology as being a key enabler for people with sight loss and being a key enabler for people with a disability. One of the things on my team that we've kind of embedded as a mantra is technology is the single greatest enabler for someone with sight loss. And I say that as someone with sight loss because it's been something that has helped me throughout my career, and I really wanted to bring that kind of that mantra to the NCBI. So in terms of technology, we offer a wide range of supports for people with sight loss and their families and friends as well. So we offer advice on specific types of mainstream and assistive technology. I think it's very important that, you know, nowadays an iPhone is as powerful as some of the more accessible technology was many years ago. And also we offer technology support. So if you're struggling either in employment or in your own personal life with a technology issue, you can call us and we'll support you on that. And we offer technology training and specific types of assessments around technology needs as well. So yeah, I think that the need for, as we were talking just before this, the need for technology assistance is ever more present. And I'm thrilled to be working in the NCBI and offering that support to people with sight loss and their families.
Brilliant, yeah, and they're fantastic services that you've outlined there. And just to come back to you, Gerald, just in terms of your own work and the Centre for Excellence in Universal Design, what are some of kind of the examples? Could you give us some of the examples of the supports around assistive technology and accessibility from a digital sense that you would give to companies, businesses, or anybody looking to access that information?
We've a range, as you said, Christabel. I suppose the big ones, and it's a new role that we've just been given in January, is to carry out the monitoring of public websites and mobile applications. So that is a new role under a new directive, European directive. We also got a new role again in January of reporting on the implementation of the Irish Sign Language Act. And again, how public bodies are implementing the provision of Irish Sign Language in their work environment, but also very much in education being a big area. So part of that is putting guidance in place to support employers on, particularly around, as Kyron just mentioned there, like the technology side, the web and access to the web and websites is critical. So we have significant guidance on how public bodies and private companies can design the website, because it is now, due to COVID, it is the window into any employer is through their website. So unless the material and the website is fully accessible, it becomes almost like the steps into a building for a person with a disability, that they can't access a website and whatever, be able to browse through the information, etc. So that would be a big area that, and again, because of our new role, it's now very important area. But also the whole rollout of mobile applications and how they need to be accessible, as more and more companies are now using apps as a way to communicate, particularly with their employees. And if that's not accessible, it becomes a huge barrier for employment for persons with disabilities. So there'd be two big areas if we're looking specifically at technology, but the other significant area is the built environment, how to make your building and your workplace more accessible. And we would have Building for Everyone, a series of publications which are recognized nationally and internationally as best practice on how to design your built environment or your workplace to be more accessible, be it from a retrofit perspective, but also for the new build. And I suppose finally then on our biggest kind of publication over the last kind of 12 months has been working with the Department of Public Expenditure on our customer communications toolkit. So how do we communicate with our customers or with our employees, be it from a verbal, written sign or digital content perspective? And that's now being widely used right across the public sector, but also we're getting a lot of requests. Again, all our material is freely downloadable from our website, universaldesign.ie, that people can actually use at no cost.
Brilliant. And if if a company or a business was listening or watching this today, Gerald, and they were wondering, you know, how or what would the first step be in kind of checking the accessibility, for example, of their website, what advice would you give them?
Well, there are free tools that people can do a quick check on if their website is accessible. But as we constantly refer back to, ask people. It's very straightforward. People kind of get very what sort of work have we to do here? Have we to put a research projects in place, etc.? It's just ask people, do you find our website accessible? What are the difficulties or barriers? So we constantly go back to that, and we hope to be launching a set of guidelines specifically around Ask Me guidelines, which we published about 15 years ago, but need to be updated. So simple, ask people, what are the barriers?
I think it's a really important point. I mean, you know, that you said, you know, regarding people being able to, you know, the window into any organization is obviously their website. And in terms of, you know, obtaining employment, more and more, you know, you have to follow the process that the employer puts in place. And, you know, being able to actually complete the application form can be a huge barrier for people we know with sight loss in my organization. And we've spent a lot of time looking at the WCAG guidelines that are as part of the overall legislation that says this is how a website needs to be accessible. And we've provided a huge amount of feedback to employers and people around how they can actually make their websites accessible. I think, you know, with us in the NCBI, it can be a little bit unique because we a lot of our staff are people with sight loss. We people like, you know, like myself who use technology with sight loss. So trying to interpret the legislation and give cohesive advice around accessibility is sometimes what's asked for. I think an interesting point that I would say, back when I worked in the private sector and we were building websites and we were building applications for customers, you know, and I've worked in some big Irish brands like, you know, Ryanair, Dunnes Stores and AIB and places like that. And there's always this ambition to make things accessible. I think most employers now have that ambition. I think sometimes the knowledge piece, and particularly on the technical side, can be a little bit overwhelming. So I think having, you know, resources like ourselves and the NCBI or through Jerry and the NDA, you know, there is advice out there and support for people, you know, in their, you know, aspiration to make their digital content as accessible as possible, you know, and you're dead right. It's all about asking it and, you know, embedding that practice of making, you know, digital design as accessible as possible and as inclusive as possible.
And Kyron, would you have, because I know you do a lot of work in this area around different assistive technologies, would you have any examples of some of the technologies that are out there that, you know, employers or businesses could tap into? So be that for checking the accessibility of their website, or be that their communications, like their PDFs, all of that.
Yeah, so there's kind of, as I mentioned earlier on, I think if you look back 10, 15 years ago, a lot of the technology that was out there was very specific to one particular area or one particular disability, like, you know, and we used to do a lot of support around that, but that's kind of shifted. Most people that we support now around the sight loss side of things tend to be using what I would deem more of a mainstream device, like just a normal computer that you would buy in a store. It might be set up and configured slightly differently to use screen readers or things like that. And a screen reader would allow someone to have the content of a web page read back to them. I think it's kind of a two-sided sword then, is because we can provide the technology to someone, let's say, who has a disability, to allow them to engage with a website or engage with or read a PDF back to them like anyone else. But there's also a responsibility on the employer to make sure that their website is accessible and follows the standards that will allow that content to be read back to them as well. So we've kind of taken the approach in the NCBI to work on both sides of the coin nearly. So we support people with sight loss to teach them how to use the tools on their laptop or their mobile phone or their, you know, or their tablet device, whether it's a screen reader, whether it's magnification, or whether it's some sort of motor support that they might need. But then additionally, we offer that advice to companies around how they can make their websites accessible. So if you want to fill in the application form, if you want to work, sitting at your desk every day, how you actually can use the technology that your employer is providing to you to make sure that you're as capable as anyone else. I think the most important point that I would tend to make around technology is, my view is that if you can sit and use a computer, you're as employable as everyone else, and most technologies, whether it's Windows or Apple technologies, Microsoft or Apple technologies, have such incredible disability software built into them right out of the gate now. There's not a need as much as there was 10 or 15 years ago to buy really expensive, hyper-focused technology. You can, even with an Apple device, for example, you can turn on VoiceOver, which comes for free as part of the software. So for us in the NCBI, and particularly in my team, it's about empowering people with the knowledge and how to use this technology, how to enable them to, sit at a desk and use Microsoft Word or whatever they may need, in the same way as the person that might sit beside them or remotely during COVID time. I think, and then as I said, it is really important to stress as well, then the responsibility is also then on the employer to make the applications and software that they're using within their organization as accessible for people as well. And like Terry had mentioned, like that there is standards out there that can be followed to make sure that software on mobile applications and websites meets that standard of accessibility. And then once you meet those standards, I think rather than you have both parties, the person who has the disability that needs some level of assistance, and you have the employer, or both, people can just kind of get on with things at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, when people, sometimes when we talk about accessibility and we talk about, websites, and sometimes there can be a little bit of fear with people that they're not particularly comfortable with technology. And I suppose there are elements of any website that it's quite straightforward, actually, the accessibility, because it might be the colors that you use, it could be the contrast, it might be the alternative text to your imagery for a screen reader. So sometimes the changes are quite simple and probably nothing really to be afraid of. But Gerald, what advice would you give, to anybody that's watching this and they're kind of saying, oh, that all sounds like too much. It's not really something I'm comfortable with. I don't understand technology. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, well, I suppose wearing my universal design hat, it's all about good design. And we're not just talking about persons with disabilities here. And as Karen said, then if you create a very good website where your content and the language you're using is plain English, that people can easily navigate through the websites, that again, if you're using images, that you're using alt text, because people are looking at an image, they don't have to have a visual impairment. They're looking at it and say, what's this image about? And they just click on it, and there's a text box to say, this is Ger Craddock from the Centre for Excellence in Universal Design. If there's a picture of myself, etc. So it is about best practice. We don't like using the word best practice. We talk about good practice, because we're still striving for best practice. As in, that's why the centre it's Centre for Excellence. So we're still striving for it, rather than we are the centre of. So yeah, no, it's all about good design. And again, part of the training that we're partnering with the likes of Irish Computer Society, etc., and that Karen is saying, it's getting the web developers, again, looking at undergraduate training in third level institutions, that it's part and parcel. And then if you want to design something that people are not confused, unsure, and as Karen said, when it comes to forms, filling out a form, what people don't want is that the phone is constantly ringing. One, frustrated customers at the one end, or if you're looking for employment, I can't fill out the form, I can't understand it. So designing it properly at the start makes life easier for everybody. Yeah.
And Karen, would you have found, in terms of your own work over the last 12 months with NCBI, would you have seen any particular impact or effect of remote work and or COVID on maybe people's engagement with assistive technology and kind of their interest in it?
Yeah, I think one of the things we saw, particularly on my team, is that when the lockdowns were first announced, the level of technology support required for people who were going into office and were trying to set their technology up at home was almost exponential in growth. And that continued right the way through 2020. People were working at home, and I think that the key kind of indicator really was that if you're working remotely, like your entry into the office is technology, so your reliance on technology is more and more. And I think um, for a long time we talked about living in a digital economy, in a digital world, but that became even more important, particularly for someone, I would speak around the sight loss side of things, because isolation became much more of an issue with sight loss, because sighted guides were more challenging in a COVID world. So we had people, and it was really eye-opening as well to see, because not only from an employment point of view, we had a huge amount of requests around how to use Zoom with screen readers, how to use Microsoft Teams and all the other video conferencing software is out there. So a lot of the initial need came around purely just set up and being able to engage with their colleagues through remote environment. And thankfully for me, like the likes of the Zoom or Microsoft Teams are generally quite accessible as tools. So it became more of a training issue, because particularly around someone with sight loss, trying to explain a whole new set of keyboard shortcuts and developing memory around that, and that was kind of our initial challenge. And then it became more in the and it's not quite on the employment side of things, but then we found more and more requests are coming in for I need now to use an online shopping for all my grocery deliveries. And we found there was a lot of challenges for our user base, where frankly just most of the big well-known online retailers, their sites just are not accessible for people with sight loss. And now we were seeing actually a shift more and more as the jobs market opened up again. We're getting those requests coming in constantly. Now I can't complete an application form, so I know our users are definitely struggling with being able to literally just get onto a website and complete a web form. So the need, as Jerry said, for universal design is really evident. The need for accessible websites is really evident. So I think to get over that first hurdle is massive. But I think there's also there's an appetite out there from employers, I think, to make this happen. I think we're doing calls like this and being advocates of this type of accessibility and out of the gate is really, really good. And I think I don't think the need for people to work remotely is going to stop as COVID becomes less of a thing. And I think that need for people with a disability to be as included in in a virtual world, because it might be a mixture of a virtual world and people back in the office as well. So I think that's not going to change. I think that's that ask for technology support is going to continue. We haven't seen any of those asks decrease over the past year and a bit now. They're still increasing. So more and more people are still needing support around technology for their specific disability, and obviously we're here to help, but I don't think it's going to go away.
And Gerald, would you have experienced the same in terms of engagement from kind of people, companies with the Centre for Universal Design over the last 12 months? Would you have had an increase in engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose echoing what Kyron is saying, like my own staff alone, the number of my staff have various disabilities, including deaf and hard of hearing, and that connectedness we're finding being huge. But I suppose another key point that we're finding is where people are working from now in their home environment, and the research that we've seen is not great in the home environment. And again, we talk about universal design homes. How do we design them better? And key part of our own guidance is that there are these quiet spaces built into homes or apartments, so that people can actually work remotely. As Karen said, really, I think we're in this hybrid model for the future. So it's one, that access to technology, and we're talking to people around the country where the broadband is a huge issue. A number of my staff are working remotely in Mayo, etc., because they can at the moment, and their broadband is not great. So, but the infrastructure being critical. But I think as we go back into the work environment, again, the physical environment is critical. You know, as Karen said there, and then for someone with a visual impairment or another disability, being able to access transport, being able to access the building, as in, you know, one of the, you know, a great assistive technology that we would see is automatic opening doors. And the amount of new buildings I'm seeing in Dublin where they're putting in revolving doors as the main entrance point is a huge barrier, be it a person in a wheelchair, someone with a visual impairment. And then how do you actually manage these? Even I would find them difficulty, and they're great fun for kids because they keep going round and round, but I think for lots of people, and again, we use supermarkets every weekend or whenever we go shopping, we never think about it. The automatic doors lets us in without ever thinking about it. It's one entrance for everybody.
I can vouch for that, Jerry. I can't stand, as someone with sight loss, I find revolving doors very difficult.
Yeah. I think for lots of people, and I don't know, it's seen as a fancy design feature for buildings, but it's not practical. Right? And again, if you're looking at evacuation, getting people out of the building, trying to get people through a revolving door is a crisis point. So.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what's striking about all of this is that, you know, be it the assistive technologies, be it the physical building, those changes actually benefit everybody. So yes, they benefit people with disabilities, but for example, I'm just thinking, you're talking about the revolving doors. I mean, that design feature isn't friendly to a parent who's trying to get a pram and 2 kids into the building. So a lot of these kind of designs do create accessibility for everyone. And I'm sure that you both will have kind of found that maybe throughout COVID, a lot of the technologies that were there or seemed to be there before to help people or to assist people with disabilities have actually benefited an awful lot more people for remote working.
Absolutely, yeah. But the significant piece of research done a number of years ago by Microsoft, just looking at the accessibility requirements for their staff, and they were amazed that close to 60% of their staff were using some form of assistive technology. Because it was built into Windows or Apple, that they didn't look for accommodation. They were able to actually do the modifications, the employees themselves. So it is a huge cohort of people who don't put their hand up to say, I've got a disability, but they try and do their own accommodations. And I suppose a great line from the Norwegians, they talk about good design is essential for some, but it's great for everybody. You know?
I couldn't agree with that more, I have to say. And you see more and more people, good design is inherently accessible as opposed to a design needs to be accessible. Do you know what I mean? And even when recently we undertook, and I think there's even within our own sector, I know when I approached NCBI, you know, we were looking at how would we rebuild our own website, our own visual presence. And one of the things that, you know, I was trying to explain to our own team and when we're engaging with people is that an accessible design doesn't need to look like an accessible design. A good design will be accessible. You know, a well-designed website will be accessible. And that's, you know, having clear messaging, having clear contrast and all those things doesn't mean that a site cannot, you know, be visually appealing as well. You know, and that's a key part for us. And I think more and more you're seeing that. And even when we've had corporate clients that have come to NCBI on advice on their mobile applications as well. And, You know, I think there's a little bit of fear that if they try and make something accessible, the user experience might be impacted, and that's actually not the case, you know, that we find more and more. And I think the point that Jerry made is so critical, like, you know, based on that research from Microsoft, you know, and I'm actually surprised it was that high, but I'm not, you know, I think it's great actually that it's that high, that most people, you know, at 60% of people within an organization that's staffed at Microsoft level are using some level of assistive support. Whether they know it's assistive technology or not is irrelevant, but they have that support that's available to them, you know. And you'd find a lot of the advice that we have, like, so we would tend to do technology support or set up a device for you know, for let's say someone with sight loss, and more often than not, in the middle of those technology assessments, someone will say, oh, I actually might like that feature too. Like, you might have a mother, a father, or a brother that's there as well, and they'll see how we can set up the device maybe with larger font or something basic like that, or increase the contrast. And you'll find people in the room will do it for their phone as well, even though they wouldn't identify as someone with a level of sight loss or a level of, you know, disability that might need support. So I think, and it's like when I said at the start, you know, we support, you know, ultimately 60,000 people ish in Ireland. I think that's massively underreported, because a lot of people will use a level of assistive technology that they don't even know that is assistive, but it's, you know, it's becoming more and more the mainstay, and it's more and more on mainstream technology, as, you know, as Jerry was saying, on Windows and Microsoft systems. It's there for you if you need it. You don't have to need it, but it's there if you need it out of the box.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of people aren't aware, as you said, of the technologies even that are readily available, that are free. So we'd be that the accessibility checker on their PowerPoints, or, you know, the ability to dictate actually for your Word documents. And I think that comes back again to how it makes things accessible for everybody, because an awful lot of people are obviously kind of at their computers all day. So even for a person to be able to get out into fresh air and to be able to actually dictate emails, that is a knock-on beneficial effect for everyone. So in terms of yourselves, Gerald and Kyron, are there any kind of standout pieces of assistive technology, or if there was somebody listening today and you were able to say, this is one piece of technology you should go and investigate or look at using, what would that be?
I can go first if you like.
Go ahead, Kyron. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can just speak from my own personal experience. So as I mentioned at the start, I've about 20% vision of nystagmus. So I grew up with limited vision, and I grew up using monoculars, which are like a single telescope for seeing, you know, distance. And I hated using it. I hated the fact that I had to use it. I hated everything about it. And particularly, I also use magnifiers as well. So in terms of the one piece of technology that I carry now, is I carry my iPhone everywhere. And this is my accessible tool. And it's not built it's built primarily to be a good phone and a good smart device, but it has assistive technology built into it. So I do all of my reading on it almost exclusively. I set the font nice and big, but what's most important is I can click the home button 3 times and it'll bring up a magnifier. So when I'm standing at a bus stop now, I use my iPhone to see the bus coming, because I can call up the magnifier. I can tap the back of it twice and it'll call the magnifier function up. Every evening when I read my little girl a story as she goes to bed, I was panicked when she was born, because I wanted that experience and be able to read, you know, a nighttime story to my little girl. And now I use the magnifier on my phone every night to read her a story as she goes to sleep, you know. And throughout the day, as I'm talking to people, people's perception of me isn't that I'm using any assistive technology. I'm just using the iPhone that I have in my pocket. So for me, the most empowering device that I have, that is not even an assistive technology device, is just an iPhone. You know, and I think they're incredible devices. You know, I am literally glued to this all day, because it's not only an iPhone. Everyone loves their smartphone now, but it's my assistive technology as well, and that's what I use exclusively.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I think that's the best advertisement I've ever heard for an iPhone.
Yeah, I tend to be a bit of an Apple fanboy because it's what for me it's enabler, you know. I would say that the Android devices have similar features. I'm not as up to speed, but just to be impartial, I'm sure Android devices are quite almost as good.
I was going to say the smart mobile phones probably being the more appropriate answer there, Karen. But yeah, definitely mobile technology. But again, back to your standard PC, then has so many features built in, as in more people are working from home, and a lot of the features that Karen says now is on mobile smartphones on your PC. But I suppose just something very different, and back to what I see is a huge, not quite an assistive technology, but is the automatic doors to get into a building, as in for employees not to be whatever trying to figure out, or again, if people are coming to a building, that automatic doors we see as a huge enabler, because if you can't get into the building, you can't start to work, you can't go and whatever other services you may be looking for to get into a building. And back to Karen's point, that we talk about great design is invisible, so you don't even see it. And then, just like an automatic door, we use them every time we go shopping. We just walk in, we don't even think about it. But definitely, I suppose over the last 30 odd years, that has been probably one of the biggest enablers for everybody. And as you mentioned earlier on, family with their stroller going into a shopping centre or whatever, that and carrying out bags whenever that may happen, that you don't have to try and open or close the door before or after you leave a building or enter a building.
Yeah, and then coming on from that, then I suppose we have noticed over the last 12 months, we've all kind of our workspaces predominantly been a virtual space. And I know, Kyron, you touched on it earlier as well, around kind of assisting people with access and, you know, the online events, the Zooms, all of that. What kind of tips would you both give to people around making their virtual spaces accessible? So be that your Teams, your Zoom, those types of platforms, what kind of tips would you give to people on that?
We developed a toolkit that's during COVID, that's available on our website for online meeting accessibility. So looking at the various tools, be it Zoom, be it WebEx, and the features and links to guidance around how best to actually use them in the virtual world. But I suppose a big one that we found is the lighting. I think Kyron mentioned it at the very start, getting the lighting right, that you can actually see the person. So some people put a bright light behind them, which makes it almost impossible for the person who is being interviewed or during work, they can't actually see the person, which can be quite unnerving. So lighting as a key one, and again, looking straight at the screen, talking directly at the person rather than sideways or hand over the mouth, as I'm demonstrating here, does not create that kind of conversation, which is what you're trying to do over the virtual. So there would be a quick tip.
Yeah, I think one of the, similar to Jerry, we've created a huge amount of resources in the NCBI for people around you know, using Microsoft Teams or using Zoom, or you know, or smart technology as well, such as, you know, Alexas and Googles. So if you there's a dedicated, if you go to the NCBI YouTube channel, all of our videos are up there and they're all fully accessible as well. And we have done over 50 events now, which are our weekly events where we discuss technology and, you know, working from home and how to use technology. But one of the things that I would say is, because it seems to be it's not so much a tip, it's more of a recommendation, if you don't mind, is because we tend to see the same things that come through on our support line from our service users. And I think initially, using a new piece of software, or having to use new hardware, new setup, there's always going to be initial phase where it will take you time to become accustomed to it. And I would say that the likes of Zoom and Teams, etc., are all very accessible, but they do take time to learn. If you have, particularly if you've got sight loss and you're using keyboard shortcuts, it's a whole new area that you need to develop almost muscle memory for. So even the basic things like coming on mute and coming off mute, as Jerry would say, like setting up your environment. So, and all of that takes time to orientate yourself. So my recommendation or my tip would be just to give yourself that time, and practice with your family and practice with your friends. And that's also an additional way to be engaging with broader people as well. So when you comes to a work call, you don't want to be on a work call where people are asking you, questions that you might be nervous about or you might be presenting. You want to have, developed that learning around using Zoom or using Microsoft Teams as well. And again, just if there is people that require assistance, do reach out to the NCBI. We're happy to help as well. The numbers are all on our website.
Brilliant. God, I've learned so much myself from listening to the two of you. It's been absolutely brilliant. I'm conscious I'm coming up to the end of time. So is there any additional takeaway points that either of you want to make? And also, if somebody is watching this today or listening in and they want to get more information about what you do, Gerald, in your centre, or what you do in the NCBI, Kyron, where should they go? So I'll let Kyron go first because he's on the screen.
Sure, thank you. So yeah, if you need more information, ncbi.ie is our brand new website. So do please come to it and have a look. It's a fully accessible website, and we've got a huge amount of comments and praise on it being accessible. So I'm extremely proud of it. We also have a huge amount of resources there around technology and how we can support you in technology as well. And I would say, as I said earlier, we do support corporate as well. So if you need any assistance with making your website accessible or anything like that, do reach out to NCBI. My team is called NCBI Labs, so you can email us directly. Either you're someone with sight loss or someone with a disability, or you're a family member, or you're a corporate that needs some advice on it. And the email address is labslabs@ncbi.ie, and we're happy to help.
Brilliant. And Gerald?
Yeah, well, all our material is up on universaldesign.ie. I suppose not just from a technology perspective, but also looking at the built environment, products and services. So how do we design our products or our services? Being significant work that we've done over the last couple of years, and as I mentioned, our communications toolkit, be it for written, verbal, sign, or digital, is probably one of our landmark documents over the last kind of 12 months. That's again, can download, and it's again very easy to use. And as Karen says, being universal design, our website is fully accessible, and we're actually in the process of doing a big revamp, which will be probably later in 2021. We'll be relaunching the website. But yeah, lots of materials there that are freely available. Again, back to the web, as we mentioned at the start, being probably one of the big areas that people can get right. But I suppose a message to employers out there is one, not to be afraid. And then this isn't, as I use the phrase, mad science. This is all about good design. And I think what's important, I think, is creating champions within your own organization that can lead, and looking at it from a hierarchy perspective. This is coming from senior management, that it isn't one individual somewhere in the structure, but it needs to be led from the top, and creating that kind of network. Be it a disability awareness team within the organization, because as Karen and myself have said, loads of resources are freely available and people to contact if there's any queries. So
brilliant. Thank you so much to the two of you for taking the time to talk to us today and for giving us all of those brilliant tips. It's really, really helpful, and I'm sure it's very helpful for anybody watching or listening. Also, to anybody who wants to find out more information about Employers for Change, you can go to employersforchange.ie. You can also email info@employersforchange.ie. And we also have a helpline for anybody who has any queries. So it's 085 157 9603. And we're also on Twitter and LinkedIn. So you can find more information about events like this that will be holding throughout the course of the year. And thank you very much for watching today.